You're listening to the What Happens When podcast.
What happens when two guys sit in front of a laptop talking about God knows what?
And here is your host, Gene Van Horn.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the world's most dangerous podcast, our second most dangerous podcast. I might actually have to change that level of danger, just mainly because I lost a couple of hosts with my move here. Anyways, it's your host, Gene Van Horn. I'm back after a long layoff or a long hiatus. I had a nice move to halfway across the country. So now broadcasting live from Houston, Texas, the great state of Texas. And if you're new to this show, you'll know that this is what happens when three guys sit in front of a laptop and talk about God knows what, or in this case, two guys today. It's a show basically where a couple of friends get together, kind of talk about some topics in an entertaining way. Hopefully you learn something, or hopefully you just have fun. With me tonight is a guest friend slash buddy. I don't know how to introduce him, but he's a two-time TED Talk presenter as well as host of the Perception is a Bitch Man podcast. And he needs no introduction. The interwebs around. Deji Akingbade, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate you, Gene. It's good to be here.
Hey, man. Thanks for doing the show. I know it was kind of short notice. I kind of just hit you up like on Saturday, Sunday.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was Saturday. Yeah, and we decided to make it happen.
Yeah. So I was listening to the podcast. It's hilarious, by the way.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the dynamic of the show. But go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of let the people know, what it is you do and who you are.
Gotcha. So I wrote this philosophy about perception. I think I've spent a good portion of my professional life really trying to understand the nature of perception, perspectives, and how that influences people's lives, the outcome of the lives we live. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a book called Perception is a Bitch. And writing that book gave me an opportunity to give or present my ideas on a TED stage. So I've given 2 TEDx talks. The first one was at Independence Community College in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. The second at Kansas State University. And now I'm hosting the show, trying to spread some more ideas about perception and how she's a fucking bitch.
Yeah, man. So what got you like on that path of starting that podcast?
I think most good ideas come from life lived or come from experience, right? So they say necessity is the mother of all invention. The guy who invented the fork was probably because he was trying to eat something and realized, man, my hands, I can't do this with my hands. This has got to be a better way. Or the guy trying to eat soup, realizing I can't keep sipping from the bowl, invents the spoon, right?
Right.
So in my case, I had enough unfortunate events happen in my life that were a result of either my perceptions, how I interpreted things around me, or basically how people perceived me and interpreted my behavior, my actions, or the things that I said. And I lived out the consequences of those perceptions, some positive, some negative. And I just had this moment of epiphany one day where I just realized, fuck, man. Yeah, perception's a bitch. Because, I didn't mean that, but sure came out wrong. And here we are. All right. So that's how that happened. It's life lived experiences from my life that just kind of led me down that path.
Yeah. Man, it's so weird. This is my first podcast doing without a live studio guest. So
right.
Trying to keep an eye on your video and maintain a weird eye contact with the camera is pretty funny for me. But yeah, I was listening to the show and I listened to a couple of episodes, including What the Fuck is Water?
Right.
That was a great episode, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really funny, really informative, and I totally enjoyed the thought of it. You told a story about, I guess it was a professor that was helping you fill out a resume.
Yes.
Yeah, and he kind of helped you change the way you were putting it out, and that reminded me of a story in my life. But for the people who didn't hear it yet, go ahead and like kind of relive. You don't have to relive the whole thing, but just tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so I'll kind of start it off again. The philosophy with perception being a bitch, and to start that episode, I told a story of two young fish who are swimming in water, come across an older fish, and the older fish looks at these two young fish and goes, "Morning, lads. How's the water today?" And they kind of swim past him, not really thinking too much about it. And about 10 minutes past that interaction, the one fish turns to his buddy and goes, what the fuck is water? Right? And the point of the analogy is sometimes the most obvious things are the hardest to see and hardest to talk about. So the answers a lot of times to the problems you're having in life are so obvious, but your perception doesn't allow you to see them. So in my case, I lived in Searcy, Arkansas. It's 20,000 people. About 98% of the city's white, right? There's like 200 Black people in the entire city. My name, pronounced entirely, is Deji Akingbade. Kind of sounds Muslim if you think about it. So I'm putting that on a resume, wondering why I'm not getting any callbacks, let alone any jobs. I didn't realize this was perception at work and perception being a bitch in my life.
Right.
So about 2 years of job search. And so like there's this 2-year period of life lived for me where it was a bunch of minimum wage jobs, making ends meet, not knowing where rent was coming from. Like, that grind hustle of just like, man, I got to figure life out. This shit's not working.
Right.
So that was 2 years of life lived. And finally, I had this professor who reached out to me and said, bro, I'm going to just let you know what the hell's going on. Change your name on your resume, because when people see that, they're making perceptions and interpretations about that name that they can't even make it down to the qualifications you got on that resume. And I knew exactly what he was saying. He was right. But I had so much pride in who I was, where I was from, and my name that I was sort of kind of blind to the cultural perspective of how, living in White County, Searcy, Arkansas, how those people might perceive that name. So I finally changed it. I just shortened it to go by Deji, which is much simpler. And dude, I was employed in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've actually had a similar experience in my lifetime. So when I was younger, I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. I grew up in like a very mixed neighborhood. So I tended to dress more like hip hop-ish or more hoodish. It was a poor side of the tracks, so to say.
Yeah.
And I used to dress that way: hoodie, do rag, big old earrings, and everything. And as I began to branch out into business, I started to realize like people would talk to me a certain way, like I was a kid, like I wasn't a valid businessman, and
Right.
I would get pulled over all the time. And I had a mentor of mine say, "Dude, you really get a lot of tickets." And I'm like, "I know, man." He's like, "What are you, Fast and Furious driving?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know. I don't know what's going on." And he's like, "Do me a favor, for 3 weeks, don't dress like a teenager." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he told me to change my outfit, change the way I carry myself, and see what happens. So for that time,
Right.
I didn't get any tickets. It was like magic.
So when you say that, it brings a thought. So I did this one episode called what's it called? It's the simple art of not giving a fuck.
Right.
Is what it's called. Because too much in society, they tell you don't care what people think about you, right? Don't give a fuck. Be yourself. But I think that's a little misplaced, because the reality is you kind of have to give a fuck, because you make interpretations about people. People make interpretations about you
all the time.
And, and you're going to suffer the consequences of those interpretations. So in your case, you got a bunch of tickets you had to pay that when you look back over the course of your life, that was life lived.
Right.
That reality you lived through was created by somebody's perception of you. Doesn't mean it's who you were. The way you dressed didn't really speak to your character, but they make an assumption about your character based on how you put yourself and how you. Not fair, but perception's a bitch, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So once I changed the perception of that, I started to feel a little bit different. I started to feel more important. I started to carry myself better into certain situations, and that changed a lot. But what changed for me was the advice I got from that mentor. He told me, he said, if you don't like the way something looks, change how you look at it.
I
Right.
love that.
So um, I started to look at it instead of being a negative, like, man, why do I have to change, the way I look? I started looking at it like, why don't I take some pride in the way I look and stop walking around like I don't give a fuck, right? Because that was my attitude. I mean, that's my attitude right now in general. I have a bad case of the fuck it's. I was born with a bad case of that. So I kind of use that as, my motto for most of my life. And
Right.
once I realized that I need to change people's perception, because perception is reality. No matter what the truth is, there's always perception, and that makes it the reality for whatever that person is viewing. What's going, like right now in our comments, we got somebody who's viewing this with a bunch of Z's. They're falling asleep, right? Um, so so his perception is that it's boring, although you and I perception is like we're having a
Somebody else may be finding extreme value for us. For somebody else, this may be life changing information that changes how their life turns out.
right, right. So you said something interesting in there. You said, I had a lot of pride in who I am, and that kind of brings me about. Like I heard you say that on your show, and I was like, this would be a perfect conversation to have with Deji. Um, is pride in general baffles me when it comes to certain things. Um, Pride by definition is to be proud of an achievement or like happy about an achievement, right? So as we just finished Pride Month, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with like gay pride or anything like that. It's just pride in general to things like race, religion, or I guess religion less, but race, religion, sexuality, or like country. You hear like American pride, and you hear like you're Nigerian, so you're like really
Yeah.
proud Nigerian gentleman. So that just baffles me, and I think it's maybe because I'm mixed race, uh, that I don't really identify with being Salvadorian, and I don't really identify with being white. Um, I was born, in a poor area with a lot of like black friends, like I said. So, I didn't really know what to identify with, so I didn't really have much pride of that growing up. So it's always been weird to me, like when you say I was a proud, Nigerian person. Like, well, what makes you proud to be Nigerian, and why do people have pride for things that they didn't achieve? That's always baffled me.
Okay. Again, I look at it from the perspective of perception, right? And for me, whatever culture you're born into are the shackles or the limits that you were born into. And your job going through life is to rise above those limits. So for me, coming to America, it's funny you say that, because when people talk about growth and wanting to grow in their lives, all growth means is adding on new perspectives, seeing the world in a way that you hadn't seen it before. So by definition, to grow, you kind of have to give up what you are, right? So when you take pride in the limits that you inherited from birth, that's where a lot of people lose and miss growth and wonder why they never grow, or because you fail to see the world through other lenses, through other perspectives, other filters. So the evolved man is somebody who can rise above the cultural limitations. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some stuff that I enjoy about being Nigerian. There's parts of my culture that still serve me today and I love. But to live in America and take pride in being Nigerian is to miss the very beauty of what America can offer me. Does that make any sense there? So
Yeah.
essentially, what I tried to do was not be Nigerian and not be American and not be limited to any one of those perspectives,
Right.
not basically not take pride in it.
That makes sense. Um, yeah, I always just find it odd. Uh, like, okay, I understand I understand people when they say like black pride, right? And I think it because it comes from they've been oppressed for so long. Uh,
Right.
so they're like, well, but I don't understand. Like, I don't understand where the pride is directed towards. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I've never understood it. Or like gay pride. It's weird because if a straight person has straight pride, then
It's
automatically they're seen like a bad person.
right.
And that's weird because they're just expressing their pride in their heterosexuality, and you're okay to express your pride in your homosexuality, not you specifically, but in this case scenario. But if I say I'm proud to be straight, it's like, well, what, you don't like gay people? Well, do you not like straight people? Like I that's a weird. Then it begins this like weird tribalism that begins to separate us. And I believe tribalism was like great for a time, right? We had a
Mm-hmm.
time in human history where tribalism helped us survive and move forward and build civilizations. But I think that we're becoming a global world, and tribalism is going to be less important. Um, if you get what I'm saying.
100%, 100%. So there's two kind of thoughts that kind of pop into my mind when you say that. Like, first of all, I think that when you stand for something, by definition, it means you stand against somebody else or something else. So when you say I am proud to be straight, then you may not mean it that way, but now you're basically saying unintentionally that you don't like gay people, right? So when you take a stand for something, you automatically are standing against something else. That's just that. And I also think this whole need to feel pride in something is biological. It's this archaic biology that I don't know we human beings have evolved out of. For example, here's a good analogy. If you adopt a kid right now and you show them all the love in the world, right? Logically, they should not want to figure out who their biological parents are because they got the very point of raising kids, which is to be loved, fed, they got a good education. You probably even sent them to an Ivy League school, paid $100 million or $100,000, however much it costs to send them to a great school, great education. They had a better life with you than they would have had anywhere else. However, though, at some point, that kid, him or her, still feels the need to find their biological parent. That makes no sense to me, right? But I get it. I get the biological need to want to know where you're from, to this archaic need to want to figure out what your origins are. I think human beings haven't evolved beyond that biological desire the same way we haven't evolved beyond, wanting to have sex to reproduce, in the world. So those two kind of correlate, at least in my mind.
I could see the train of thought there, and I could see where you're going with it. Um, I just find it weird. Okay, like one that really gets to me is birthdays. Everybody's like, "Yeah, I'm a birthday." Like, you didn't do anything to achieve this, but you're so happy that it's happening, and it just trips me out. Like, in essence, you're basically celebrating a day that you came out 9 months after your parents had sex. That's weird.
But again, like existence is pain, man, and we have existence is pain, and motherfuckers got to have birthdays to kind of numb the pain of existence somewhat. So we fill existence or our lives with these mile markers, these ceremonies. And in a way, that's how we remind ourselves that, life is still worth living and there's still a tomorrow worth waking up to, waking up for. We do the same shit with weddings. We do the same shit with, anniversaries. Anniversaries are kind of pointless, right? If you think about it in that same kind of regard.
No, because you work. I don't know about you, but I work at my marriage. It's tough.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
heard your podcast. It's tough.
Yeah. Perceptions almost ended my marriage multiple times.
Mine
I got
too.
battle scars.
Yeah.
I've got scars to prove it.
Yeah, so that's why I understand those things. Like, okay, you win a championship title, you get a promotion, you make $1 million, you do something that requires some point of work. I respect it, and I find it something that should be celebrated. But like, here's a question that I often ask. Like, if you had the opportunity to be born again, like start life all over with everything you know now about
Right.
life and how it works, would you pick to be Nigerian again?
Me, no.
Right.
But that's personal, right? Like if you ask somebody who was born in America, if you ask Donald Trump's son if he'd do life over again, what do you think he'd pick?
Well. So here's the thing, because he's been on a better side of life. He definitely wouldn't pick to be poor.
He wouldn't pick to be
Right.
Nigerian, that's for sure.
Right. That's what I'm
He wouldn't
saying.
pick to be born black.
Right. I think a lot of people wouldn't be picked to be born black, or
Or
because
women,
or women, or exactly right, and
right? Yeah, I
marginalized.
mean, to be real, any marginalized cultures.
Yeah, any marginalized culture at all. I think that that's why the pride in it baffles me so much. And I'm not saying that only white people should have pride because they're not marginalized. What I'm saying is, even if you're born white, why are you so proud to be born something you didn't choose? You were just born that way.
So this I don't want to get too political, but we can get into conversation about the whole, Black Lives Matter, Black Power.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fight for power. That's all it is, and I want to choose my words carefully. But there are certain things that are just inherently human, and it's got nothing to do with color or race. It's just human nature. It's human nature to want to discriminate and marginalize people because we're all seeking power.
Right.
So the context of it is going to be different from culture to culture. So I can tell you that growing up in Nigeria, we had slaves. My grandparents had slaves. We called them housemaids, but they were basically living slaves, right? Like that's black on black. Here in America, it's black and white. But the fundamental point is human beings always seek to kind of marginalize other human beings.
Right.
And there have been tons of studies throughout history that show this. The blue-eyed brown eyes test, where they told the kids with the blue eyes that they were better than the kids with the brown eyes. And just by telling them some subjective bullshit like that, they began to believe the bullshit and discriminate the white kids with brown eyes, right? Or even the prison experiment, they tell some people that, hey, you're the guards and you're the prisoners. And then over time, the ones who were called guards start treating the prisoners like shit. That's human nature, right? So what baffles me more is that we get sucked into the context of it and make it a black and white conversation when it is really a power conversation. Human beings wanting power over other human beings. Fuck, all you gotta do is watch Lord of Flies if you ever seen that movie. And even that kids, fucking 12 years old in the jungle. Wanted to and they were all white. They were all fucking white, right? Right. So when we black people are trying to gain power, it means that somebody else, in this case, white people, have to give up power.
Sure.
Right. And there's no true system to kind of balance the power. It's with human beings, it's an all or nothing. So white people trying to balance power, the fear is, oh, now they're going to take all that power of the black folks and just, run away with it. And, so it becomes this weird dynamic. But
yeah,
I think the context of it is what throws people off from generation to generation. It's more a human nature thing, and human beings just want to have power over other human beings.
What really trips me out with that aspect is the person who has zero power, but his perception is that he has a bunch of it. Like, let's just say the random guy in Middle Texas, which is like poor town USA, but for some reason feels like he has some sort of power over you, Deji, who's like wealthy and affluent, but he somehow thinks he's like, yeah, white power better than you. It's like those people baffle me. Like, when perspective really changed for me is when I grew up and I realized that I was poor, like growing up.
Yeah.
Because, when you're loved, my mother loved me. My mother did the best she could do. My father left when I was 7 or 8. They divorced later on. My dad was a bus driver. He made pretty good money. My mom's a nurse. She worked at a pediatrician's office. She made good money. But at about third or fourth grade is around the time my dad left. And I remember going from private school to public school. right? So when
Okay.
I was at private school, and I always felt weird around like all of the other people, and I could tell that some of the people looked down on us, right? Um, and then I realized like my friends couldn't come over and play at my house where we lived at in our part of the neighborhood. I had to go over to their house. Like we had some friends that, they lived in a nice neighborhood because we all went to the same private school. So
Yeah.
our parents could afford to send us there, when they were married. But then when they got divorced, we had to go to public school after that. And then probably about fourth or fifth grade, I realized like, oh wow, we're actually poor,
Yeah,
right?
and that changes your outlook.
Yeah, yeah, big time. Yeah, big time. It changed my outlook. It changed my perspective on what poor is, what wealthy is, um, and how to move forward. And then it kind of shaped me for my children now and how I'm trying to parent them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was, I think that's why what the fuck is water really resonated with me.
Mm.
It was that feeling of looking around like what the fuck is water, and then realizing like I'm in water. Yeah. One of
Right.
my favorite sayings, real quick. One of my favorite sayings is, "You're an ant on a runway. You never know what the fuck a plane is."
I like that. Yep. It's a question of perspective.
Yeah, you could see the plane, you could observe it doing stuff, but an ant on a runway has no clue what it is.
So I'm gonna share something that I think the audience might benefit from. So, and I don't want to get too philosophical here, but if you think about it this way, COVID-19, I think, has kind of accelerated life by call it 10, 20 years. So wherever the world would be in 10, 20 years is where we are now. So I think one of the big misconceptions out there, or misperceptions, misinterpretations, is thinking that COVID changed the world. It didn't change the world. It just sped up where we're going to be. Now, what that means for the average person listening is you begin to see how it's shifting our economy, right? And you and I kind of feel the brunt of that. Um, but if you look at where the world is going to, everything's online, everything's digital. People are still talking about jobs that are not going to come back,
Right.
right? Asking like, when is normal going to come back? And I'm like, normal is not coming back. For example, you think about sports, for example. I was at a gym working out the other day. They're playing soccer, and I realized that there's no fans in the stadium.
Right.
Right? The NFL, the NBA, they're about to start playing with no fans in the stadium. But then have you ever seen those Oculus VR glasses?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about this. You can watch live sports with friends and family anywhere in the world and have courtside seats
Yeah.
with your Oculus glasses.
Yeah.
Will we ever need to be in stadiums anymore? Now going to a stadium is like going to a zoo, right? To just see the just for nostalgia's sake, let's go check out the animals, because we can't make it to the fucking safari.
Right.
But right, so that glasses, virtual reality, theoretically, until it happens, has changed the way we watch and experience sports.
Yeah.
So think about the thousands of people who got displaced from their concession stand jobs, or the GM at NRG Arena,
Staples Center, stuff
Staples
like that.
Center, all wanting their jobs to come back. And again, I look at that guy and I go, see, that's the example of a fish in water, where the world, you're so oblivious to the world around you, you don't even know what's changing. You're still stuck on how the world used to be. You can't even see how it is right now.
Right. Yeah, that actually goes for like Netflix. Netflix was kind of the first wave of like changing it, but that 3D thing has been around for a while. You could be able to watch it on NBA.com, like from the goal, the
right
over the hoop. You could be able to watch it from there. I watched a couple of boxing matches from the corner with my cell phone, bro. Like you put it on your cell phone, you watch it, it's there. It's pretty
like
crazy.
Right there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They're the best seats in the house. So I know exactly what you mean, man. I've kind of listened to your show, and I think you said that on I think it was the show after. Maybe it was after What the Fuck is Water, or what it
was not What the Fuck is Water.
Yeah, I heard you say that, and I was like, yeah, man, that exists right now. Like they've been doing it for a while and trying to push it for a while. Right now, it's going to blow up. If I had money, I'd put it on VR.
So think about this. So when the crash happened in '08, like that was another market economy change, right? Where you look at the companies that came out of that era, that crash. It was Uber, it was Netflix, it was Facebook, it was Instagram,
Right.
And those businesses had existed prior to that crash. But when the economy shifts like that, it gives a platform for what I call a wealth transfer.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes very hard for people to see what's fucking obvious, because people are still stuck in what careers should look like or what jobs, their interpretation of what going to a job should look like, that they're not seeing that. Look, man, that world, you're so dated right now, you don't even know how dated you are.
Right.
Like Peloton, just, Lululemon just fucking bought Mirror. Yeah. Most people don't even know what Mirror is.
Yeah.
Mirror is a virtual trainer. It's
at
like
home.
At home. It's a fucking, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people still talking about, when can I get my gym job back? It's like, bro.
when is your trainer going to be back?
Yeah. That world does not exist anymore. You're a fish in water.
Yeah. I feel you on that, man. That has been a crazy paradigm shift, even with digital currency, right? People are now starting to this Bitcoin thing might actually be a thing. No, it is a thing.
This blockchain thing might actually. It's like golly.
Yeah, I mean, I have several cryptocurrencies in my portfolio, and I'm mad because I actually had an opportunity to buy Bitcoin when it was $100 for Bitcoin, and I had $2,200-$2,300 to spend on an investment at that time, and I ended up loaning it to a friend so he could pay his mortgage or rent or something, because his wife was losing the house or something. So I gave it to him. I never got the money back, and then I didn't buy Bitcoin.
Just give it to him as a gift.
It was a gift. I knew once it left, it was over. It was done.
But here's the thing about perception, right? Like hindsight is a bitch. Because only in hindsight, if you have the self-awareness, do you realize how much your perception or your false, wrong perception fucked you over. Mm-hmm. It's weird that we have 20/20 vision, hence the quote, hindsight's 20/20. Right. We've got perfect vision looking into the past to see all the mistakes we made, the misinterpretations, and all the opportunities that woulda, shoulda, coulda been. But unfortunately, we don't have same set access into the future, right? And that's, in my opinion, one of the many flaws of perspective. Hence the quote, hindsight's 20/20. You can only see shit after it's happened.
Yeah, I hear that, man. That is a bitch right there. Hindsight is a bitch, because then you could see the error of your way, right? You're like, fuck.
Yeah, couldn't I have seen this in the future, looking forward?
Yeah. That's definitely one of my good qualities is future vision. Another thing that if I just had the money, I would have done it myself. But I had the vision for what Netflix is now, or what Disney Plus is now. It was probably about 10 years ago. So Netflix had just went digital. They just started doing at-home stuff, no content of their own. I was working for Master P at the time, and Master P was about to buy a what's it called? A TV station, a channel, because Oprah was just getting ready to open OWN.
OWN, okay, gotcha.
So I told him, let's not go terrestrial TV. I was like, let's go internet network television. And he's like, what is that? I said, it's something that doesn't exist. I'm making it up right now. And he was like, well, what are you talking about? I said, the internet is the wild, wild west. We can do whatever we want. We can charge whatever we want. As long as we bring content that people want to see, they'll pay for it. And this was before anything was big. And I was telling them, let's call it internet network television. I even had how we were going to market it. It was INT for short. And we were going to play old football clips of Montana dropping back, he throws it into interception, because interception is INT, and then we go
Yeah,
a new
like
way
that.
of watching TV, internet network television, right? That's what we were gonna do. I could not get anybody to understand what I was saying. 2 years later, Netflix starts creating their own content, and the rest is history. I was so pissed.
Dude, see that's the thing. So a lot of times you have to recognize when you're talking to people like those two young fish who are in water and don't even know that they're in fucking water.
Right.
Right. Like that's damn near half the battle. It's the reason why people can't see the change happening in the world right now. And kind of like we just talked about, in hindsight, perception becomes a fucking bitch.
Man, I love the show. How long you been doing it now?
I've been doing it about a year in March. So right at about a year, a little over a year.
A little bit over a year. That's cool, man. So you're how many episodes in? 63, 64?
53. Yep.
Nice. Looking back on it, what's been your favorite episode?
Okay, so what the fuck is water is probably one of my favorites. I like episodes where I can just geek out philosophy and just kind of rant.
Mhm.
The subtle art of not giving a fuck is another one that I really enjoy, because I think that took a pretty popular concept with the book Mark Manson already wrote.
Mhm.
There's another TED talk on that title, same title, where I could really just explain to people the problem with perception. And then any episode that I do with my wife is really up there with me, because that's where we get the alcohol out. We get the coconut tequila, and it's super fun because she brings a dynamic or an element of fun to the podcast that is refreshing for me. So she, if you could see the setup, she's got a glass, I got a glass, and we're just pouring the tequila. And half the time we're talking for like 5 hours straight, but no one wants to listen to a 5-hour podcast. So we got to turn it off after about an hour. But those two episodes stand out for me, and really anyone that Sarah's on, I like, just because the dynamic's different.
Yeah, it does bring a change. I mean, when I first started this podcast, it was me, my brother, and our close family friend, who's basically like our brother, right? And it was just three guys just goofing off. At some point, I added a friend of mine who's a cosplayer. She's a female friend. She does cosplay, and she would have her. She gave a different dynamic to the show, and
Right.
it adds a different perspective, because at the end of the day, guys usually come to some point of like agreement, right?
Mhm.
Because we kind of have the same perspective. We're guys, So when you get a girl in the mix and she's pretty vocal about her point, and it just mixes the show and it makes it better in some areas, and in some cases you're like, okay, calm down, lady.
Let's say that, not in 2020, you might get in trouble. Perspective.
How did you get your wife to be interested in it? Because my wife won't do it to save her life. She would
Okay.
not do it.
I'll give you the secret. It's the alcohol.
We don't drink.
Oh, y'all don't. Oh, okay. Shit, you might have to find something. So I had to bribe Sarah. That was it. That was it. And the only thing that she loves more than me is coconut tequila. So I was like, hey, look, we can sip a little, sip, and she's got the humor of a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, let's, And she was like, hey, if I get the drink, I'll give this a shot. So
Yeah. Hey man, so we just got a shout out in the comments. It says this is a fire podcast, bro. Very informative. Bless up. So
I appreciate that.
yeah, man, I'm actually appreciating that too, because it's actually a different style than what I normally do. What I normally do is basically BS, but every now and then I'd have like a serious conversation. We try to keep it light, man, just mainly because there's enough serious stuff going on.
Right.
But we do try to keep it, fun and entertaining. But I really wanted to sit down and have this conversation with you, because I haven't had to hang out with you in person, or got to hang out with you in person in a while. So I think probably like 7 months since the last time we saw each other. So I wanted to, sit down, pick your brain, and your podcast gave me that avenue. And I've been really trying to get this thing back on the road. It's just been a a journey, man.
Right. Dude, I appreciate it. And one of the challenges about philosophy is the shit's boring, just call it out there. So the challenge is, how do I help somebody see the value in a different way of thinking, but present it in a way that's entertaining and fun, and that's what we try to do. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man.
Yeah, I think you're achieving that, man. It's a great show. We'll probably wrap it up here because, let's see, it's been about 41, 42 minutes. We'll give it a night's rest. It was a good show back. But go ahead and let them know where they can find you. I'll put some links in the comments on my podcast and stuff like that. But let them know where you're at.
Okay, so you can find me on any audio platforms, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify. It's Perception is a Bitch. You can find me on Instagram, Perception is a Bitch. Just anything Perception is a Bitch. On any platform, you'll find me.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty easy name to not
easy,
mess
right?
up. Yeah. So find him out there, Apple Podcast. There'll be a link to his Apple Podcast because he really is proud of the Apple Podcast, guys. I'm like, look, I listen to you on Google. He's like, no, Apple Podcast. Go give me
Look, man, if you ain't got an iPhone, you don't count.
Zero iPhone over here. It's a Google family.
Look, don't. Hey, look, there's enough. I got enough people who will validate my perception on this one.
That's a perception that I fight hard against.
That perception is reality for a lot of people.
Dude, it really is. Apple is genius at their marketing. They're genius. Yeah, we'll actually get back together in a couple months and talk about that and just marketing and how they go, because you got a brilliant marketing mind and you're a great sales guy on your own right. So make sure everybody goes to Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever they podcast and look up Perception is a Bitch. He's got some merch on there. I don't have a promo code, but maybe I could get one from him. But go ahead and support my man, Deji Akingbade.
Appreciate you having me, man. This was fun.
Thanks
Thank you
so much, man. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and log us out of the show.
All right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Be safe. Bye.
You've been listening to the What Happens When podcast. Tune in next time to find out God knows what.